how I always start, really, which is the challenge for organizations. Why is innovation, performance, and improving how we work as innovators relevant to our organizations? And I think these set of common themes have been around for a while, so they're not super new, but it's just helpful to get on the same page. And I can also pick out the things that I think are going to be particularly relevant to today's session around innovation portfolio management. So firstly, the pressure for growth and profitability doesn't change. That has been there forever if we're in a commercial space. And so innovation is often seen as a way to help deliver that. Of course, we want to protect the future of the organization. I'll come on to that again in the next slide in terms of just how important innovation is to helping to extend the life cycle of organizations. Many of you work for organizations where you have geographically spread expertise. That can make it very difficult to bring the right people together in person to go and co-create and come up with new things. That gives us some challenges as well when we are spread out, even within a geography, so let alone beyond one country and speaking different languages. Some of you complain about the fact that we just struggle with lack of new thinking. We don't really get a sense of what the new things are that we should really be doing. And when we do, it's really hard to qualify which of those are going to be pertinent to us moving forward. Some of you will complain that there's a lack of transparency on the new things that we're working on. And that's very much a topic that I'm going to be digging in today. I think this is a big tenet of this topic of innovation portfolio management, is trying to create transparency over the new things that are being worked upon, irrespective of where they're being worked upon. And there are going to be 8 that I talk about today. We'll talk a little bit about the process, having a process, what that means in practice. We'll talk about balancing that portfolio. I think there's some changes in thinking and perhaps what's been available historically to us. We'll talk about governance over the innovation portfolio, something called an innovation shelf, which may be a new term to you, but I'd like to introduce into the lexicon. We'll talk a little bit about people and priorities, data associated with our innovation portfolio, how this can support an overall path towards more agility, and then rounding up with some KPIs and dashboards type discussions. So just be 1 or 2 slides per topic, but hopefully you'll be able to take something from at least a few of these. These are best practices that are, I would say, becoming increasingly obvious, but not necessarily widely implemented in most organizations. Many companies will have an innovation process that they follow, but they may not necessarily have all of these other bits and pieces that perhaps really make it fly and sing. So there may be some things here you go, well, we do that already. We do it pretty well, and that's great. But I would question if everybody's doing all of this stuff well. What I've tried to do is to cherry pick what I'm seeing as the sort of the trend towards improving innovation performance around portfolios, and then highlight those trends as best as I can. Let's start off though with this topic at hand, the innovation portfolio problem, and what it is we're really trying to get into here. Well, the future of our organization depends on what we sell in the future. And yet we're in an environment where constant change is normal now, and that's uncomfortable. I mean, as people, we don't really adapt to change too much very well. As organizations, it's even harder. Even the people that say they embrace change, it's still uncomfortable. And especially when you're thinking about medium and large organizations, they really do suffer from a lack of transparency over new things and have good governance over where they're putting their time and their energy into creating innovations. And part of that is a consequence of just size. As we get bigger, we devolve responsibility into divisions, into countries, into people that are close to our customers and clients, and say, you go and do what's necessary for you. But the challenge, of course, then is that you get overlap, you get gaps, you're not necessarily sure whether what's being worked upon is going to deliver the outcomes that you need, and whether we should be pivoting and adjusting our approach. And also, as we start to become more agile as an organization, we need to think much more carefully about what core competencies and assets are we going to leverage. What is it that we're actually good at versus what do we sell? It's not always the same thing. And so understanding what the core of the business is, and therefore which other things we should be pushing into, is also a critical part of this overall puzzle. Pick a process. There are lots of processes out there. There's a Bob Cooper process here, a staging gate. Here's an agile process. You can go and even ask ChatGPT to build you an innovation process and everything that you needs to go into that. The important thing to note is that there's no such thing as a perfect process, and every organization's concept development process is a little different, at least a little different. Sometimes they're very different. But what I would say is that having a process for the different types of innovation is helpful. So be that incremental, strategic, transformational, disruptive, whatever you want to call it, but having that variety of processes so we don't try to put an incremental innovation through a strategic process, that makes sense. Having some standardization, at least at a high level of what those processes should be, is a good thing. It does help with our governance over that portfolio. But then also having the mentality that we're going to learn about working with this process, iterate it and refine it as we go along. Again, that's another tenet of ISO, is to review, reflect, and then to make adaptations to the things based upon experiences. As I said, there's lots of processes out there, but my short answer usually is pick one and then make adjustments if you need to. And where I think this is all heading is some kind of dashboard that maybe looks a little bit like this. It's not my greatest work, but it should give you some sense of measurement. And I'm going to work from the right-hand side to the left. We'll start with innovation outcomes, what we're expecting in terms of hard benefits, money, time, speed. And that red area is what we've been talking about today, that innovation portfolio, our active portfolio and our innovation shelf, where we segment across the different types of innovation, but we also have that minimum viable data set for each of them. So we can look at it as a portfolio and we can decide if we want to shift something from our shelf into our active portfolio and vice versa. Really pragmatic, sensible decisions to have. And all our innovation activities and our really fuzzy front end stuff all feed into that, to the both of those portfolios. I suspect this is where we'll end up in the end. Kind of dashboard that maybe looks a little bit kind of dashboard that maybe looks a little bit kind of dashboard that maybe looks a little bit kind of dashboard that maybe looks a little bit kind of dashboard that maybe looks a little bit kind of dashboard that maybe looks a little bit kind of dashboard that maybe looks a little bit kind of dashboard that maybe looks a little bit kind of dashboard that maybe looks a little bit kind of dashboard that maybe looks a little bit kind of dashboard that maybe looks a little bit kind of dashboard that maybe looks a little bit kind of dashboard that maybe looks a little bit kind of dashboard that maybe looks a little bit kind of dashboard that maybe looks a little bit kind of dashboard that maybe looks a little bit kind of dashboard that maybe looks a little bit kind of dashboard that maybe looks a little bit kind of dashboard that maybe looks a little bit kind of dashboard that maybe looks a little bit kind of dashboard that maybe looks a little bit